Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's ISE webinar, which we're very pleased to be bringing alongside Gradcore, who are part of the Careerpass Network. I'll be handing over to Helen and John very shortly, who'll give you an insight into what they're talking around through the bulk of the session. Just a reminder about how ISE webinars work. My name's Steve Isherwood, Chief Executive of the ISE. I'll be sort of acting as host towards the end, because what we want to do is make this as interactive as possible. So if you've got any questions, please pop them through the Q&A box or pop them into the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on those as we go through, and we'll and we've definitely got time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. I think the subject's a really important hot topic at the moment. What's happening with students, with graduates, with engagement, what's happening with engagement, with employability on campus. So I think we're going to have a really great discussion this morning. As with all our webinars, we record them, so you will be able to get the chance to go back and pick up on anything that that you want to revisit, but also you'll be able to share the link with your teams as well. So we're always very keen to spread the knowledge of our sector. So we'll be doing that afterwards as well. So without further ado, let's get into the meat of the content. Helen, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Stephen. Thanks for joining us this morning for our session on students, graduates, and the great employability disengagement. So as Stephen said, I'm Helen, and I'm joined by my colleague John this morning. We're both partnerships directors for Gradcore, and we work with a number of early careers recruiters to design and deliver their recruitment process. And we then feed that knowledge into the work that we do with universities, students and graduates, helping to increase their overall skills, confidence, employability and outcomes. So what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to kick off by looking at the why behind running different types of careers and employability events. We're going to have a bit of discussion around various barriers to participation. We're going to look at different methods of engagement and showcase some best practice in this area. And then we're going to finish by our recommendations going forward, and there'll be time for questions and answers at the end as well. But before we do that, I just wanted to clarify why we're talking about this subject today and what prompted us to research it further. So over the last 18 months in particular, we've been approached by a number of the clients we work with who are struggling to get students and graduates to engage with their careers and employability events. So there's been a lot of time and money invested in offering various opportunities, and the students just either aren't showing up or they're just not properly participating. So we've worked with around about 50,000 students and graduates over the last few years, and we've seen some trends and patterns in this area, and we wanted to kind of share our insights. Most importantly, we wanted to explore these points from the perspective of students and graduates. Now, some of you are probably aware that there's already been a piece of research into this area quite recently, delivered by ACCAS and Simplicity. It's a great piece of work. There's a full report written there. It is very much focused on responses from careers professionals, whereas our particular piece of research has gone out to a much wider student and graduate audience. And we've also included employer perspectives as well. So in terms of how we got our responses, we had an email survey that went out to audiences from two of our sister companies, graduatejobs.com and GradTouch. And we got a total of 1,804 responses. And you can see there how that breaks down into the different groups. And a lot of these responses are from people who graduate this year or next. So it means that the insights we're going to share with you are going to be very relevant, very up to date in what's being done now and what's needed most. We also got responses from 59 employers from the ISE database, and that's they're from 9 different sectors, and you can see there the different sizes in organisation that are represented. And we also had 16 responses from universities, each from a different institution. So yeah, we're represented across kind of all 3 key stakeholders there. And at this point, I thought it would be important to look at what do we mean by engagement? And that's certainly a question that we asked universities and employers. How do they understand? How do they track engagement? And you can see there some of the responses that were generated when we asked this question. You know, we've got applications, feedback, stats, questions, surveys. There's lots of different terms there. And what that really shows, no surprise, that there is no one simple definition for engagement. You know, if employers are running events to showcase their vacancies, of course, they're going to measure engagement by the number of applications they get. And similarly, careers events, they will measure their events by surveys, feedback questions, lots of different channels there. So we just wanted to reinforce that message that the definition of engagement is always going to very much depend on what's being delivered and how it's being delivered. But for the purposes of this session, we're looking at engagement in terms of how motivated and interested students and graduates are to attend and get involved with different events. So let's start by looking at the motivation behind some of these key sessions. We asked employers and universities to choose the 3 areas that they currently support students or graduates with the most. And these are the options that they selected, ranked in order of most popular. And as you can see, employers are mainly focused on helping them to understand the whole recruitment process, followed by succeeding at assessment centres. And then it's understanding the skills, strengths and experience that they're looking for, tied with interview tips, techniques and practice in that area. Universities, their top 3 that they're currently supporting with is around CVs, cover letters, application forms, developing self-awareness, that career journey that we hear a lot about, and very common ground with employers around educating students and graduates on how to understand the skills, strengths and experience that employers are looking for. And we also asked employers, what are their top 3 reasons for running careers and employability events? No surprises there, right at the top, 85%, it's all about sourcing talent and encouraging applications. And that's closely followed by raising awareness of their brand. But what's really encouraging to see there, one of the top 3 reasons for running them is to support specific cohorts of disadvantaged students or graduates. And this really aligns with the university widening participation agenda, which is great to see. And from our perspective, we're actually supporting a lot more employer clients with those targeted programs. So we've worked with NGDP and Capital One, where as part of their recruitment process, we're giving targeted coaching to some of their minority groups of candidates who need that bit of extra support. So we're seeing a lot more of that, and it's great that features so highly in the work that employers are doing. When we asked universities the same question, what are their top 3 reasons for running these events? As you'd expect, no surprises there around it being to achieve university objectives, improve graduate outcomes, followed by opportunities to network and learn from employers and to build those partnerships, build those relationships with those key stakeholders. Students and graduates, again, ask that same question. What is it they're looking for? Why do they attend these events? So first and foremost, 62%, they want that opportunity to meet employers and graduate recruiters. That's what's really important to them. And that's also backed up by Simplicity's research too. So we've seen this as well. We invite a lot of employers to our events, whether it's to kind of showcase their vacancies, to network with the students. We run virtual industrial placements where the employers get involved in a bit of a judging panel as part of the work the students have done. And we can say that for those events where employers are involved, it's increasing attendance around about 20%. So it really does make a difference. And it's very important to kind of promote the fact that employers are going to be there and how they're going to be involved. And there's different ways of doing this, which we will come on to. Students and graduates are obviously very geared towards securing a role. That comes second there. And finally, one of their top 3 reasons is that opportunity of personal development and increased self-awareness. Now, interestingly, the lowest ranking reason for attending these events, you can see there 9% only about getting credit or marks for attending as part of a module. This goes against what we found for our events, where actually if something is truly embedded as part of a module, so by that I mean that it's timetabled, it's assessed, it's marked as part of an assignment or an overall assessment, we see on average 50% increased attendance from those involved. So although it might not be a main motivation for them going, it certainly helps with getting them there and getting them involved. We then asked students and graduates what they most want to learn about and attend events on. And you can see there almost 50% are looking at interview tips, techniques and practice, writing a winning CV, cover letter, application form, coming in at 47% of them, and finally networking effectively. And networking is a theme that's coming through loud and clear from the students and graduates in lots of ways, in terms of the extra support they require, in terms of how they want more opportunity to do that. And we'll come back to that point. You can see as well there, only 17% want support with understanding the whole recruitment process, which is not many really, when you think about the fact that employers are targeting that the most as the thing they're focusing on the most with their support at this current time. Something to think about there. We also asked the students and graduates from the events listed below to rank them in the order that they'd be most likely to attend. Right up there, in-person careers fairs, which is, yeah, I didn't need to do a survey to know that. And you can see from LinkedIn, there's so many posts at the moment about the levels of engagement and attendance from the return to in-person careers fairs, and real engagement there. It's fantastic to see. We've got personal skills development workshop coming in second, and that networking event creeping up there too. So again, just to come back to that networking point, when we asked universities what they're most supporting students and graduates with at the moment, networking didn't come into it at all. It wasn't, they were given it as one of the options and none of them selected it. So students and graduates have that appetite for networking, and it's something that we do need to support them more with. Confirmed by employers too in this slide, when they've been asked which events have had the best levels of attendance. Again, those in-person careers fairs, followed by virtual and networking, with 41% of employers saying that that is one of their best attended events. So some of the things we've done at Gradcore around networking is we've had some very events just focused on networking, where it's all about workshops and kind of creating opportunities for them to do that. But we're also kind of sliding it into some of our existing programs where perhaps it's not the main focus. Our assessment centre experiences, for example, we're introducing networking sessions in between the exercises where they've got the opportunity to talk to employers, where they've got the opportunity to deliver an elevator pitch and so on. So it is about shaping that support, slipping into various different offers, because it's certainly something that's coming through loud and clear from the students and graduates. We also use this survey as an opportunity to find out if there is the right answer, what is the best time to run an event in terms of getting those students and graduates there. Because it's a question I get asked all the time, actually. So universities and employers will say to me, should I run this in the morning or the afternoon, the evening? What's going to get them there the most? And when responding to this as part of our survey, universities have broadly said that there's no difference in terms of when they attend. Employers have lent towards the afternoon, and actually saying that the best levels of engagement they get is in the evening between the hours of 5 and 7. But you can see there that students, they've said that they're happiest to attend in the afternoon, and only 15% of them responded to the fact that they would want to go in the evening. So employers are saying they're best engaged in the evening, students are saying they prefer not to go in the evening. But I think it very much depends on the cohort, and we certainly spend a lot of time understanding the particular cohort we're working with. So if it is students and graduates who have a lot of external commitments, it's about factoring that in. And we've seen a real shift in some of our events to running these out of hours, whether that's evenings or weekends. And it does have better attendance than running them in the morning, for example, for that particular cohort. But I'm going to hand over to John now and to have a look at some of the barriers to participation.
Thanks for that, Helen. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so I guess further to Helen's point there, especially around, if you skip back to that last slide, Helen, about preferences of when people would like events to occur. A lot of our work now, especially around the coaching through recruitment processes occurs in those twilight hours, those early evening hours. And once you open up that possibility, the diversity of the audience that attends increases also dramatically. We've had people, Deliveroo drivers, in fact, tethering to a hot spot in their car in the full sort of aquamarine, if that's the sort of shade of blue or green that their uniform has. But that's the extent to which they wish to participate, is that they'll literally, whilst on shift almost in that car, in that situation, participate. And you wonder, if that session was at any other time, would they possibly have joined? So it's really encouraging to see that kind of engagement and impact by offering something that's sort of slightly out of the sort of normal delivery windows. Okay, let's look at the other barriers to participation then, in particular. So we asked employers and universities, what were the top 3 reasons you believe stop students and graduates from engaging in careers and employability events? And as you can see, employers think actually they don't quite understand how it will be beneficial, whereas universities think actually the vast majority of them said it's all to do with the lack of confidence and anxiety. Employers also thought that too, but perhaps less so. And so there's some work here, I think, both on the employer and university side to just talk more. So if it is definitely the case for the universities that there's a need to supply more information, more guidance, perhaps more coaching in a recruitment process for their students and graduates, then obviously that's on the employers to sort of provide and work with the universities to try and overcome those barriers. And then obviously also work and other commitments. As we are in the midst of this cost of living crisis, there are so many other burdens on people's time, and there's also more and more a necessity actually for people to have part-time jobs to pay the heating bill if nothing else. Thanks, Helen. Okay, so then we asked students and graduates, actually, what is it? What is the reason why? What are the top 3 reasons why you can't attend these events, or what is it in particular? And toppermost is the lack of time, or perceived lack of time. So there's all those other features that we've spoken about that might be eating into their day, and they perceive that they have that sort of lack of time and space almost to attend. Over half of them also said that they got a lack of confidence and/or anxiety. So that chimes again with what the employers thought most of the time, and especially the universities. That tells us that there's some real work here to be done around encouraging students and graduates to attend those events and do more in the way of on-ramping that experience. Perhaps if you were to just label an event as a networking experience, that might not attract the crowd that you'd hope. So how might you break that down to be less daunting for people to attend in the first place? And then I'm sure this will be frustrating for everyone to read. They perceive there's a lack of information about the event. And if I could see you, I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people rolling their eyes right now going, well, if they just check their emails, that would be great. And we are going to come into some of why that perhaps doesn't happen at the moment, and perhaps also what we should try and do differently around communicating information and how we might engage people through those channels. Thanks, Helen. So then we said to students, okay, aside from the chance to secure a role, what's the one thing that would make careers and employability events more engaging? And so this is one thing. So if you tot up all those numbers there, they gladly add to 100, which is one of my bugbears when we have these statistical slides. 19% wish that content was tailored to them that matches their interests and career aspirations. So having specific focused content that identifies a certain group, that identifies that they have a certain need or requirement, and that there's a certain set of messages that might land with that crowd and get them to come along to event and benefit thereafter. The in-person theme continues here. So as Helen said, there's a huge renaissance of the in-person events on campus. And it's been great to see, both from our jobs boards within the group, the graduate jobs guys have experienced incredible amounts of sign-ups at those events. And that's testament to the careers and employability teams raising awareness of those and obviously the employers in getting out there and putting the message around town that, you know, there's plenty of jobs out there too. And that renewed confidence in that in-person and those in-person events having value is definitely felt on all sides. And then this gaining new knowledge and increased confidence thing. So they perceive that they don't have it. And so they want it to be more clearly labeled that as a result of an interaction or an event, they'll have this new knowledge or increased confidence based on the experience and their interaction. You'll see last amongst all of those one things is that the opportunity to co-create content. So in the university space, there are some theories and papers written out there about how students should co-create. But you can see from that actually that's not necessarily what they want. They much rather have tailored content that matches their interests and career aspirations. Thanks, Helen. Okay, so now let's look at methods of engagement and showcasing some best practice. So we asked employers and universities, which mode of delivery do you most use for your careers and employability events? So employers 59% of the time use hybrid events and universities 69%. It's an interesting one. And if we could potentially ask this question again, I'd like to see what hybrid means as well, and to what extent people are online, offline when they're doing their hybrid delivery. So yeah, 69% of the time universities do that. And then in-person or live online events, so when they're synchronous online, 47% of the time employers use those, 56% of the time universities. And then interestingly, this particular stat, only 10% of employers use pre-recorded or online events that are asynchronous, whereas universities, a quarter of the time, have pre-recorded content. And we've seen this as a continuing theme with universities, actually in response to students' behaviour and request that they can download the slides or watch the content back at a time that suits them. So it's no surprise to see that there's a sort of 25% of the time that's what they do there, because that's what they've been driven to do. But it's also interesting that contrast with what employers and their activity is like. So is part of the answer here that there should be more asynchronous content for employers to produce that students can access at a time that suits them, potentially not necessarily in the 9 to 5 as we've previously been talking about. Thanks, Helen. So students and graduates actually want in-person events, and so 56% of the responses absolutely wanted this. And yeah, that just further backs up the point we've been making about the great attendance at careers fairs and workshops and so on that we've seen during this sort of traditional autumn period. Other choices, obviously live digital events through platforms such as Zoom and Teams equally work well, and obviously also the recorded content. And interestingly, hybrid features quite high there with nearly 20% of students and graduates appreciating that there's a need almost to do some elements digitally, but still want that in-person connection to potentially practice those networking skills that they so sought after. Thanks, Helen. So the most popular methods chosen by universities and employers to inform students and graduates of these events is emails. So that's obvious. We know that. We know that we reside a lot on and rest a lot on the emails as a primary form of communication, but also internal websites and platforms such as Blackboard, Career Hub, Target Connect, and Handshake. Other careers platforms are available, I'm informed, but they are the two main ways in which universities and employers connect with students and graduates. The students and graduates also said that emails are the best ways to inform them of their careers and employability events. So 49% of them said that actually the thing that gets them interested and informed about events are emails from the university careers teams. 31% from employers and 32% from emails from their tutors or academics, or people that they know and can recognize the names of when they're scrolling down their inboxes. However, And when it comes to engaging interest in careers and employability events, the highest rated method was social. So social media in all its forms across all channels seems to be the best way to engage students and graduates with the careers and employability events. So it's rather than just sort of giving them the detail on where to go, when they should go and how to get there, it's actually telling them why and how and also what they'll get as a result of attendance. We've seen through our own experimental use of social media in advertising our mass assessment events that actually this really works. And we've had a TikTok have 571 views within the first day of putting it up and out there and promoting it through those channels. And I have to say, if we were to send an email, I'm not sure we get 571 opens on the first day either. So it really shows that if you get the right message on the right channel, the students and graduates engage. And that's really encouraging to see, and a trend that the data sort of backs up, and also our own experience. Thanks, Helen.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thanks, John. We've been very lucky to work with the University of Liverpool over the last few years, and I'd like to introduce you to Kaz Scatterhood, who hopes joined us there. Look, Stephen, have we got Kaz with us? Oh, yeah, I can see you there, Kaz. Thank you. Kaz is the web and digital content designer for the Careers and Employability team there, and very passionate about how social media can be used to engage with students and graduates. Kaz, thanks very much for joining us this morning for today's session.
Can you hear me okay?
Can, yes, thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah. I just wanted to start by asking you if you could tell me a little bit about your role and what's involved as part of that.
Yeah, sure. So I actually am fairly new to the University of Liverpool's careers team, working in their comms and engagement team. I say fairly new, I started in March. Sometimes I feel like I've just been here 5 minutes. But I sort of came in with on a mission really to kind of update our social media content and really kind of increase the engagement of what we were putting out there. That being said, I definitely see myself as more of a sort of manager, strategizer of that content. My role definitely focuses more on things like what the brand looks like, the tone of voice, the sort of campaign planning, rather than being the person that's producing the student-facing content. That's mainly because we really want our work to feel really peer-led. I want the content to be produced by students, produced by graduates, and kind of be really close to the audience. That works really well for us here at Liverpool. Our career studio model has been peer-led for years, and we've always, really focused on that sort of having our career coaches that lead the studio. And I felt like when I joined the team, that wasn't really reflected enough on social media. So I wanted to kind of get those faces out there, make sure they were kind of our digital ambassadors as much as they were our in-person ones. So I'm sort of helping them to create the content that students want to see. I think sort of being able to take a step back and recognize that I'm not the right person to be the face on the camera and giving that advice. Students really like to hear from someone that looks like them, that has the same experience as them. So we've seen that really helping our engagement for sure.
Thank you. And we've seen from our research and from the Simplicity AdCast piece as well that students still put a lot of weight behind emails. They're still choosing that as a way that they want to be informed about these events. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone listening, this is a constant frustration. When you ask students how they want to be contacted, they'll always say emails. And that doesn't put me off from putting too much focus on social media. And I think the reason for that is students will say emails because they see emails as their formal, important space. If they're going to get any sort of important information about an event, they want it to be in their inbox because that's where, this is where my university stuff is. And I think that comes down to the sort of distinction between their work and study area and their social area. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a place there as well. I think it depends on what you're doing in that space. So I think it's really important to remember that when you post to social media, what the content that you're competing with is very different to the content in somebody's inbox. You're not looking at an email alongside another university email or like that sort of more formal level of stuff. You're competing with things like posts from their friends, maybe like pregnancy announcements, people getting engaged, people's holiday photos. And, you know, now with the likes of TikTok, you're competing with all this amazing fun content from people that they don't even know. So it's like comedy sketches and just all sorts of content that is inherently more interesting and more fun to them than an announcement about an employer event. So it's about finding ways to kind of make that content fit in with what it's competing with. So trying to make it more fun, more friendly, more engaging, more sort of with that sort of like trending content. Easier said than done, but I think it's how you look at that content and how it fits within the social space as opposed to the formal, the work, the study space.
So if I was to ask you, what are your top tips for producing engaging social media content? What would they be?
Oh gosh, I guess listening to those really close to the audience, and again coming back to that sort of peer-led approach. You need to put a huge amount of trust in the content creators that might be like less experienced when it comes to the workplace, maybe communications and marketing work, but they're probably more experienced in the likes of TikTok and like what the trending content looks like and how students actually want to be approached and how they want to see information. They know that better than we do, and I think being able to admit that is the first step. So I think just not being afraid to like utilize that trending content and be able to tie those sort of like funny bits of audio into your niche, which for us is careers content, careers advice. Yeah, it's the formal tone is out of the window now when it comes to social. So I think being just up for showing more personality, making it like short, snappy, fun, and also making it nice to look at. I think a lot of people forget sometimes that like your Instagram feed should look beautiful. It's kind of what the platform is designed for. So like use nice photography, use bright, engaging graphics. You know, if that's your sort of digital shop window, does it look like something that you would want to follow? Yeah, I hope that helps.
Thanks very much, Kaz. Yeah, we're actually going to look at a couple of your clips, and just remind me, Kaz, the first one there that we're going to watch, I think had, was it 1,000 views after one day? And then
let me just check.
The second one, 18,000, I think.
The thing with TikTok is it varies massively. So we will get sort of like maybe 5,000 views on one video, and then the next day get 200 views, and it's kind of being able to like roll with the punches and just try again next time kind of thing. This particular one is currently on nearly 2,000 views, which I think most of that was in the first couple of days.
Yeah, fantastic. And the second one was it even higher, I think, from what I can tell?
Yeah, so this one was actually one that we posted on Instagram as a reel, which is similar to TikTok videos, and we posted it in collaboration with the main university account. The benefit of that being the audience was a little bit higher, so this has actually got nearly 20,000 views. Wow. Which just shows the potential of sort of like showing it to a slightly bigger audience.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Kaz. I'll just show everyone your little clips there, but thanks for joining us this session, and hopefully you can be around for some questions later as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.
I'm coming back for you, baby. I'm coming back for you.
Okay, thanks very much to Kaz there. John, back to you.
Thanks, Helen. So really interesting to see the University of Liverpool's approach there. And part of what we've learned through our work with the University of Kent is just how important great data is and building relationships on the back of that data. And we're delighted to have James Corbin along today this morning to talk through their example. James is Head of Careers and Employability at the University of Kent. and I can see him just there. James, would you like to just talk us through your approach, please? That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess there's a few bits that we do with data that's kind of interesting. We've through COVID and beyond, we've been trying to work more closely with students to understand what the barriers to kind of accessing career support and kind of going on to graduate employment are. And what we've found is that more and more one-to-one contact really pays off. And so my MA research was on factors that influence students' participation in career support. And what came through from the students was that they wanted someone to talk to that they could ask stupid questions of and not feel like an idiot. They wanted that kind of really early conversation to then engage in some of the broader experiences. And so one project that we've done with Gradcore is what's called their safety net program, which looks at supporting recent graduates into employment. And what we've done with that is we identified a cohort of recent graduates who we felt were most at risk of unemployment or underemployment. And so they included programs that have lower level, graduate level employment or specific demographics that traditionally would have lower unemployment. And we targeted those students with emails and phone calls offering support and talking to them specifically about what it is that they might need as individuals, and got them to sign up to a kind of a form talking about their experiences and where they were at with their job hunts. And from that, we were able to work with Gradcore to identify who it is that needed what type of support. And so in-house, we have 2 careers advisors that work specifically with students who are the furthest away from the labour market. And so these are students who couldn't have a Zoom call with an advisor because their anxiety was too much. These are people who had no idea what they were doing and just they weren't ready to have conversations about their future. We also identified those who were really close to the labour market that just needed a bit of signposting. And John and the team were able to then work with those in the middle who needed some support, encouragement, and a bit of guidance, but were able to successfully enter the labour market afterwards. And so that kind of support was really useful. Now, because of the way we'd been working with students up until that point, we were able to garner really strong responses from the graduate body in terms of accessing that support, because as a careers service, what we've undertaken is contacting every student individually on Teams with targeted conversations about their support needs. So we would say to them, we've seen that you've registered on Target Connect and you've identified that these are the areas that you're looking to go into. You've done your careers registration. We know you're at this stage. How about a one-to-one careers advice appointment? Or we've got these workshops coming up that might be really great, or looks like you're ready to apply. Did you want us to go through your CV with you? And so the students knew that we were there for them, specifically for them, because despite how many times you tell a student that you're there to support them, the career service is sometimes not a service for them. And that kind of really tailored support has kind of fed through into the way the students perceive the career service and their access to the support. So we've just had the civil data, which is a survey of students and graduates and how they perceive the career service. And student satisfaction with the career service has gone up by 18% since the last survey, because we are more engaged with the student body. So it's been a really great experience.
Thanks, James. That's really helpful. Thank you so much. So, Helen.
Yeah, thanks very much there, James. It was great. So just to conclude with some of our takeaways going forward, so based on the survey responses that we've had, but also based upon our experience of running careers and employability events at Gradcore, it's that message around embedding things as much as possible in 2 ways, really. So embedding content, whether that's telling the story through social media in an unexpected and fun way, but also embedding the events in the curriculum so that the students and graduates, they don't have the option to let the nerves overcome them. So yeah, very much at Gradcore, we're always pushing for embedding careers and employability events wherever possible. And actually, we've written a webinar that kind of addresses this subject, particularly in relation to assessment centres, about how to embed it into the curriculum, how to engage and motivate the students to attend, how to tie it to assessment. If anyone would like to view that, that is on our YouTube channel, but I can also post a link in the chat to that as well. John.
Yeah, so thanks, Helen. And yeah, investing in your relationships, knowing who you want to talk to, and getting the most out of your data. So as we looked at right at the outset, counting applications and seeing who attends and all those other things is great, but then actually analysing that data and knowing how you actually get a hold of those individuals, and also then get them not just to come along, but also do something as a consequence of your interaction. So by focusing events around what your audience wants, should elicit that better engagement. Obviously, we've got that example that we've used around coaching minority groups through recruitment processes and scheduling those sessions out of the normal hours to accommodate their attendance, because typically those groups have other commitments around their time, has elicited better engagement for ourselves, and also then consequently better impact on those individuals reaching the latter stages of recruitment processes for our clients. So it's a win-win in that regard too.
And finally, just to reinforce that message, which we heard about from Kaz and from our research as well, is to make that distinction in your communication strategy, in your overall engagement strategy, between engaging and informing your audience. So we appreciate that emails are needed to kind of highlight the key details of event, the key information they need to know, but it's not what's going to hook them in the first place. It needs that storytelling, it needs that unexpected, that fun narrative to draw them into it at the first point. Okay. Thank you very much for listening to our session today. We're happy to take some questions now.
That's great, fab. Thanks, Helen, John, James, and Kaz. Really informative session there. So we've had quite a few questions come through. So let's get stuck into those so we can get them covered in the time we've got. But if you've got any more questions, then please do pop them into the chat. I'm looking at them here. Right. So questions. Had a couple people asking about the slides will be shared. Yes, we can share those if you guys don't mind sending them over, and of course the recording will be shared as well at the end of it. But first question from Pam saying, do you think there are any ways to make careers events more inclusive, in particular for mature students?
I would say one of the points we've talked about a lot is about the out of hours support, which I appreciate is a little bit difficult to manage from the careers team. But certainly in our experience, and not always run by us, by careers teams, when it's been done in a hybrid approach or online, on weekends, in evenings, we have seen better engagement and attendance, particularly to bring in those people who have got a lot of work and a lot of commitments during the day. And also in the run up to some of these events as well, it's about the activity that happens before. So we do have some cohorts and students and graduates who are perhaps not as familiar with some of the digital platforms, or perhaps want more information about the steps involved, how they get to a certain place. And we have these kind of drop-in sessions ahead of time to try and really cover off some of those, what they think are stupid questions, but really aren't. So it's not about the isolated events. They're important, but the activity that happens around them is just as important in a lot of ways, in terms of showing how accessible it is to them, and the different routes they can take to access that. John, would you have anything to add on that one?
I agree with everything you said. I think just a couple of examples really is, I think I mentioned it before about potentially if you run a session that feels exactly like someone might want, or you think, oh, this message to this audience, they'll definitely come. So if it was a networking event to some business students who'd said that they want some preparation before they go to a careers fair, how you then do that in the tone of voice, as Kaz was talking about, through the socials, as to what they'll then get as a result of that interaction that they access prior to attending, and having that on-ramp of messages and potentially sessions is hugely important. When we set out delivering virtual events, as we all did a couple of years ago, the spirit with which we entered it was to have no detriment to the online experience. So whatever happened offline, what's the online version of that? And that there would have been briefings prior to some of our events. And so finding an online version of that We have a tech check before our mass assessment events, which encourages all students who may have issues that you could then put under a euphemism of tech check, and then half the questions they actually ask are nothing to do with their technology. It's more about the actual experience they're about to encounter, but doing so in a safe space where they're not being assessed. And that approach seems to yield best results for us.
Great, thanks, John. I've got another question here from Lisa Rose. So Larissa, and I know you did talk a little bit about this, but I wonder if we can expand on it a bit more. And about it's just the amount of events that are out there and penetrating, you know, into that really noisy, busy space on campus. So Lisa's specific question is: could another barrier be that students are getting overwhelmed by too many events, so centrally run, academic-based activities, and then increasingly employers running their own online events? Because of course, actually, yeah, now we're online, employers can do their stuff on their own platforms. And I know some employers have said to me that actually there's some benefits to that, because with GDPR, they get the students' contact details. They can build a relationship for feeding them into the recruitment system. So any thoughts around that, around actually just this, the amount of stuff that's out there for people to navigate?
Yeah, I think it's a very important point. There is a lot of noise around there, and it's hard to cut through it all. It's probably surprising it didn't come up more as a potential barrier in some of those students' graduate responses. It's not one of the top 3 reasons as to why they're not going. But I would probably say that it's to lean on a little bit on what Kaz said there. Really, is to cut through the noise with quite fun, unexpected content to kind of hook their interest. That kind of crops up in the middle of some of those wider social posts around pregnancies and so on, what Kaz was talking about. But it is definitely a barrier, and it is an ongoing problem to try and cut through all the many messages they're getting.
I completely agree. I'd say if you can have a really close relationship and understanding who that audience is and have great data on them, there are probably ways in which you can really zoom in and make sure that those guys definitely do receive that message, whether that's through a TikTok or a sponsored post on social media, or utilizing peer-to-peer networks to make sure that word gets around town that if they were going to go to one thing, that's the thing that they should go to.
Right, definitely. And I don't think there's an easy answer to this stuff, is there? I think it's yeah, it's just the reality of the noisy world we live in, which was the case pre-pandemic as well. Another question about undergraduate versus postgrad. So about the insights in the survey, I don't know if there was a split between undergraduates and postgraduates, but also if there's any comments, any thoughts you've got about maybe the differences in approach that you might take with postgrads to undergrads, because I haven't got a name, but the particular person who asked the question said their split is 2/3 of the students they deal with are actually postgrads, their service supports.
So we do run we run events actually for undergraduates and postgraduates, even quite recently, actually in the last couple of months. And to be honest, the barriers that we've talked about as part of today's session are the same, I would say, in a lot of cases for undergraduates and postgraduates. So I think what we have seen with postgraduates is once they're hooked, once they've signed up, that genuinely converts into attendance. They genuinely join the session and they participate very well. But you've still got that initial hurdle of trying to get them involved. Undergraduates, we see, yes, you've got the barrier, you've got the issue of piquing their interest, and then converting that into attendance and participation is a bit harder than I would say for PGs. But it would be good for us to go back into our survey results and explore the differences in those responses, actually, because that's something that we could go into a bit more detail on.
Got nothing to add. That's great. Thanks, Helen.
Excellent. I've got a couple of questions here for Kaz, actually. I don't know if you're able to turn your camera and your mic. Oh, you are marvellous. I wasn't sure if you're still there.
I'm listening.
Great, thanks. So yeah, a couple of questions that question again, I haven't got a name on this one. And actually, Helen and John, you might want to contribute afterwards as well. So the couple of questions were once about convincing your team and management that using social was the right direction, informality, risk to professional image, etc. And the other question was around actually, how do you know you're getting the right audience? Because of course on TikTok or something like that, it goes to a much broader audience, so it might not be your cohort of students that are watching it. So any thoughts on those two questions, Kaz?
Yeah, so with the first question, I think this is something that a lot of people are a bit sort of anxious about when sort of delving into the world of especially TikTok, where it's kind of maybe a much more sort of like silly approach to making content, doesn't always sort of sit with what our expectations are of university social media. And I think that at least with our central team who sort of like run the main university channels, they're really knowledgeable on what it should look like. So I think we're very lucky in that they trust us quite a lot with that sort of like side of the content. And I think they lean quite heavily on like student ambassadors to create their sort of like more peer-led content. So our approach being, we've got all these students that work for us in the studio, we want them to be at the forefront of our content. I think it sits well with what they're doing centrally. If not, if you don't have that sort of approach, I think sometimes it's about doing the thing and apologizing later. We're kind of always pushing it a little bit, and I work with an amazing graduate intern who creates a lot of our TikToks. If you look at our TikTok, you'll see her face all over it. When she first started, she was quite nervous to do things that were a bit more I don't know, some of like the more comedy, like lip sync things, anything that had swearing in it. She was like, oh, I can't really do that because it's got swearing in it. And I've just been like, just do it, like, just go for it. And students will like that. And if we get in trouble, we get in trouble, we'll delete it. Like, and it's not happened yet. And I think sometimes the results sort of like show the value of it for themselves. So yeah, that's my advice, is kind of do the fun stuff and see what the response is like, and hopefully you'll be able to evidence that oh, actually that got loads of views, so students really appreciated us going in that direction. I think you've got to have the confidence in that yourself before sort of yeah, I think sometimes asking permission is a can of worms. So sorry, what was the second question?
Yeah, I just enjoyed that. I love that bit. Ask for forgiveness, not permission. Particularly,
Yes,
think in the
yeah.
university setting when things can very quickly get bogged down in committees. Yes. The second question, Kaz, I think it was about data, basically. So I might be getting slightly on the question, but it was around data and actually how do you know your audience is the right audience? Because on a social media platform, of course, it's open to anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the likes of Instagram, we're pretty confident that the majority of our followers are current students. We see a lot of overlap with the main sort of like students channel and the university channel. And I think it's a bit of a different one with Instagram because people follow the account, and you kind of probably wouldn't follow the account if it wasn't relevant to you. TikTok is a little bit different because you're kind of relying on the content showing up on people's feeds organically. So in theory, that could show up on anyone's feed. And we hope that we're doing enough with our sort of like branding and with our sort of familiar faces with the career coaches that we've got a little bit of a following on there that are students, and that should hopefully teach the algorithm to show our videos to primarily University of Liverpool students. And if not, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if it shows it to other people. I think especially because the audience on TikTok skews so young, if it is showing our videos to say teenagers within the Liverpool area, that is an amazing sort of recruitment tool for us, and showing that we've got this amazing friendly sort of student-led TikTok account is only making us look good to other people. So there's no guarantee, but I don't think that means that it's not worth doing.
Very good points. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, in terms of building momentum to get the decision, as Cass says, yeah, maybe do the thing and apologise for forgiveness. But traditionally, universities are quite risk averse, and so if you were to, I guess, make strides towards this area, perhaps just look at and analyse the performance of what you are actually doing, and just take a pause and go, are emails actually working on their own? Are the lecture shout outs working on their own? Is leafleting outside the Students' Union working? And if it's not, then I think the old adage is, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And so why not?
Final question here that we've got, which is around actually the current climate, of course, and financial pressures. Being short on resources, I think everybody's budget's under pressure. I was talking first thing this morning about our survey results, which although positive growth for graduate vacancies, it's low growth. So I think it's going to be it could be quite a flat year in terms of recruitment this year. Of course, that means I know employers have pressures on the budgets, and I hear it very much from universities. I heard an interesting stat actually the other day, or I read it, that the tuition fee, the £9,000 fee, actual in cash terms, because it's not been increased hardly since it was introduced, is worth the equivalent of about 6,000 of when it was first introduced to universities. So that's the real terms cut. Sorry, that's a slight rambling way to set up the question, which is budgets under pressure. Any thoughts on actually on the implications of some of the things that we've been talking about in terms of resources? The person who asked this question particularly was thinking about personalised team messages, etc., and that taking a lot of time to deliver.
Yeah, so I'd say it's about activity and impact. So I guess further to my previous message about analysing what's going on, frequently we are so busy that it's difficult to get off the carousel almost to go, actually, is it working? Is what we're currently doing hitting the markers we need it to? Are we getting the right number of applications from the right numbers of students from the right universities? And equally, are the right people showing up to our events? Are they then doing something as a result of that interaction? And are our graduates getting into graduate level work? So it's almost not taking on another project. It's almost looking at what is happening at the moment that perhaps isn't reaching or refreshing all parts that it might. And so analysing, taking a moment to have a quick refresher and go, yeah, perhaps we don't run that event anymore because nobody comes. Or it's not reaching the right audience, and sort of looking at it from that perspective, because there's, like you've said, there's no new money in town, and we are all being expected to do more with what they're saying. This is the same, but it's really, like you're saying, Stephen, a real terms cut. So it is looking at those efficiencies really, and I guess undertaking the activity also in an efficient way, and you can do that through empowering students. Some of our clients are using students as social media influencers and promoting their content and either reposting it or creating it themselves in the way that Kaz has described, to reach other audiences that perhaps are more disparate and harder to get hold of. And so utilising, I suppose, the in-house expertise you have from the cohort of students who are living on these platforms in the way that perhaps careers and employability professionals and as graduate recruiters we are not. And utilising, as Kaz said, they've got a graduate intern already familiar with what works on TikTok. So just giving them the tone of voice and some guidance and saying, go get it. That's probably a cost-effective way of doing some of that, and certainly is getting traction, not just at University of Liverpool, but various other of our clients too.
Yeah, I would just add to that. Yeah, take time to step away and look at what the most cost-effective options that deliver the best results, and creating a social media post that's going to get shared and do the work without having to repeatedly send emails to reach the same number of people. Just reinforce that.
Someone just popped I don't know if it was the same question or somebody else there, and it's also asking, Kaz, if you're still there, have you got any thoughts on that, on time, budgets, etc.?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because I think in our team we're very lucky that we do have a graduate intern who is so close to the audience. I think being able to resource something like social media and even the comms team in general is not always easy with universities. I've moved across from a job in the Leeds careers team to Liverpool, and over there I was a one-man band. I was the sole communications professional. I worked with like a couple of student and graduate interns during my time there, but for a lot of the time I was on my own. So I know that my capacity there was very different to what we do at Liverpool, where we've got a bit of a bigger resource for doing things like events and comms and emails and socials. So it varies massively, and I think you've really got to advocate for having that resource, especially when it comes to working with students and grads. I think in both universities that I've worked in, that's been the most valuable thing to me, is having that knowledge that's so close to the audience, and working alongside them has just been so valuable to me.
Fantastic, great, thanks. We're on the hour, and I can see the participant number starting to fall, which I suggest people having to jump onto their next call. We all know the pressures of Zoom, as we've just been talking about through the session. Really great session. Helen, John, can't thank you enough. Really value the partnership we have with yourselves, and a really interesting, evidence-backed information that you put out to us today. And really great thanks as well to Kaz and James for bringing it to life. What happens at Kent and Liverpool. So another great session. As I said at the very start, we do record the session. It will be coming out. You will get a link. We will also be able to distribute the slides. If you've got any questions, either please come back through me or contact Helen and John directly. I know they'll be more than willing to share. Helen, John, what's the best way to get in touch with you if people need to?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is good for me. I've got my email address there on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, the contact details on that slide just there, but I can see that I've had a few LinkedIn messages just now land. So yeah, LinkedIn works.
Well, smashing. Helen, John, Kaz, James, thanks very much. Really good, interesting session. Talk to you all soon. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.